Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that is super important to me and a lot of people around me. And we have an expert on who has extensive knowledge, both personal and helping others, and that is mental health. There's been a few episodes discussing mental health in the past, and I think everybody comes at mental health and the conversation from a different perspective. So today we have Kseniya Kniazeva on, and so just some cool things about her. I'm going to let her tell most of her story, but she's Russian-born. She is comes from a long line of healers, women healers. She's an activist, a writer, an entrepreneur. She's just a few of the things that she's been able to accomplish. She has a bachelor's and an MA, and she knows 5 languages, traveled to 44 different countries. She's currently writing a book series on how to change our perspective on how we treat and deal with mental illness. And then also some of her hobbies are playing with her 6-month-old husky. She likes to snowboard, go on camps, hikes, depending on the season, obviously, especially in Utah, it's important. And then she does a daily Facebook Live at 4:20 discussing mental and physical health. So if you're interested in learning more about her, be sure to go check her out on Facebook and Instagram. I'm going to spell her name for you, although it will be spelled below. I'm going to spell it for you just so you can get this right, because I wouldn't say it's spelled how it sounds, but it's Kseniya, Kseniya, and her last name is Kniaz as in zebra, EVA. Okay, so go check her out. It'll also be spelled there, and then you can go find the links to connect with her better in the bio and the show notes here. But I'm excited. Go ahead and let us know more of your story and why you're so passionate about mental illness.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It is a pleasure and it's an honor indeed. So I've had a really intimate relationship with mental illness, both with my mother, who had her first breakdown when I was 11, basically reversing our roles for much of my childhood and my teenage years. And then at 30, having my first real manic episode and ending up in the psychiatric ward. So for the last, all my life, I've had to really come to terms with what is mental illness. What does this mean? Why is my mother acting like this? Why am I feeling this way? And I had to come to a realization of looking at it from a perspective of a gift rather than a curse, primarily for my own mental well-being and being able to go on and continue working on my dreams rather than stagnating in this cesspool of, oh my God, I'm broken. And also to try to give meaning, I think, to other people that may have experienced it. I think that there's a lot about consciousness that we don't understand. There's a lot about trauma that we don't understand. And I'd really love for us to look at someone with mental illness or someone acting irrationally and ask what happened to them rather than what's wrong with them.
Okay, that's awesome. So let's dig into your childhood a little bit more, because I don't know that I ever experienced a reversal of roles completely. I think my parents were always my parents, but there definitely was a point in time when, and I don't know if I would necessarily say it was entirely due to mental illness, but that I chose to take a more active role in who, like, what I wanted to do. A lot more responsibility and accountability at a younger age.
Mm-hmm.
But like, what was that like experiencing your mother going through? Like, what type of mental illness was that she went through, and how did that affect your life and maybe siblings' lives, other people around you?
Well, I'm an only child to a single mother, and my mom and I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 8 years old. She was actually a mail order bride. So it's a wild story of my life and how we ended up being here in the United States. But yeah, when I was 11, my mom just started acting really irrationally, thinking she was a dog, trying to eat her fingers like they were carrots after I came home from school. And and it's terrifying. Um, there's something about mental illness where you lose your mother or you lose your loved one over and over again, and then you regain them. So there is that gift that you get them back eventually. But having a caregiver not be themselves is probably one of the most destabilizing and traumatizing thing a child can go through, and needing to get them help and etc. I had a lot of resentment. I didn't understand why my mom had acted this way. I couldn't understand that there was, just because she could remember, that she didn't have any culpability until I had experienced it myself. And I think I'm so grateful for everything that it taught me, um, but also for allowing me to recreate and recreate my childhood from a different perspective and forge a new relationship with my mother based on kindness and understanding and empathy rather than resentment.
Yeah. So how long are these episodes? I just know for my own self and viewing others, they come from very different. Like every mental illness, I don't feel like it. Very many
Yeah,
of them are the same. They're all very different. We
yeah,
kind of have categorized them just because different things have different symptoms, and I think there's value in categorizing and creating isolation. I know, and I've listened to some of your other episodes. You say, "Oh, no, let's not isolate it. Let's not label it." Um,
yeah.
and
Yeah, I don't like labels, because I think it does divide us, and we seem as a society we need to understand everything, and we need to have science figure it out and tell us why this is the way it is, and so we categorize things, and so there is the normal and then there's the other, and I don't think that the mind is necessarily that way. I think there is a continuum. I think it's a circle in some ways. um, so my mom was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizoaffective bipolar disorder, and um, and it manifests in a variety of different ways. Sometimes there's a lot of paranoia. Sometimes there's a lot of fear, um, going into trance, going into completely outside of this reality, um, and there is a complete ego collapse, and so it is destabilizing and confusing because the whole world doesn't make sense anymore. From my perspective, when I experienced it, and I can't speak for her, but she says that it's very similar, that it is a very spiritual like experience. There's a lot of euphoria, but there is a lot of confusion as well, which is why I think a lot of people in paranoia and psychosis believe that they're God or they're Jesus reincarnate, because you are filled with a lot of love. You are filled with a lot of, um, really uncharacteristic emotions that you can only explain as godlike. So I understand why suddenly you're like, oh, well, I love everything, and I look into this dog's eyes, and I don't know where I end and the dog begins. So I must be Jesus coming back. So, so with my mom, she would throw everything away in the house. Like it was very cleansing for her. Sometimes she'd run away. Sometimes she'd go spend money outlandishly. Um, Other times she wouldn't be herself. She'd be a dog or Cinderella or something. Um, so it was very, very terrifying because there is so much stigma around mental illness, and I think that's primarily why we're so afraid of it, is we don't talk about it. So there's this compounding cycle where we don't talk about it, so we don't understand it, so it becomes a lot more fearful, fear prone. But if we at least understood maybe the perspectives of someone going through it, maybe we wouldn't be so terrified, because there's a lot of little kids going through this, and I had to suffer in silence because my mom was afraid I'd be taken away. So nobody even knew what was going on at home. You know?
Yeah, no, I can see that. I just, because I've done I don't know if I did a podcast or if it's just more of my Facebook posts, but the idea, I'm on both sides of the spectrum, and I feel like, so I was playing pickleball this morning, and the wider your stance, the better, because you can get lower and hit the ball better. Okay, well, I would say that's how I am on mental illness, right? On the one hand, I think there's benefit to not, to speaking about it in not necessarily generalities, but finding a way to help everyone recognize we all are the same. We're all suffering from some form of it. We can say suffering. I'll say the word suffering, right? From some form of mental illness. And I define mental illness, okay? And this is not necessarily the most popular definition, but I think it's wide enough to encompass everybody, and that's why I do it, is that any form of your brain not working perfectly. Now, who defines perfectly? There's a bunch of subjective terms, but if it's not working how you want it to be, then you could consider yourself mentally ill. If it is working how you want it to be, fantastic, right? Now, I'm not relating it to normal or what other people are relating to. I'm relating it to, is it what you want, right? So I would look, other people would look at me and say, well, Sam's not mentally ill most of the time, right? But then when I go meet with hyper successful people who have been able to accomplish things that I never have dreamed of, or I've dreamed of, but I have no idea how to accomplish it. And I look at, or they look at me and they describe my lifestyle like that person's delusional. That person, like the fact that he thinks he's going to get X result by putting in A, B, and C effort is just like, there's no other way to describe it other than delusional and hallucinating. Like he just never is going to, his effort is not matching the results he wants. That is a delusion, right? And that's at the core, right? We think we're doing one thing and we're getting a different result than we think we're going to get. So other people who think, well, Sam's normal, when I compare myself or when I'm in relation to people who have more of what I want, I'm delusional. I'm crazy. The fact that I think I'm going to get what they have doing what I'm doing. And so on one hand, I think let's generalize it to the so big of a spectrum that we all can relate. We can all find a way to relate in our lives. Like maybe I don't have schizophrenia, but I have habits or processes in my life that may not be as extreme or be manifest the same way, but they're just as debilitating to my objective. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think there's that side. The other side of my foot is saying, let's isolate. And I don't know that labeling is super beneficial, but generally when you're isolating, then you need to label so you can create separation. And so isolating every different type and principle or habit, habit formation or process that somebody's going through. So then we can isolate and say, okay, this habit process. So I use this example with my, in our family. I've used it in a few different podcasts now, but like pornography, some people turn to, or it doesn't have to be pornography. It could be pornography, drugs, alcohol, sex. It could be reading too much, Facebooking too much. For my wife, it's eating ice cream or sugar, things like that. Basically, we all have a response to stress. And when we feel stressed, we respond a certain way. And we are no longer in control of that response because of the habits that we've created. So when we've isolated what exactly is happening, it's not necessarily what's happening is schizophrenia or what's happening is depression or anxiety or whatever. What's happening is we have a system that's running on how to respond to stress, and we're not in control of it. That's what's happening. So I'm not labeling the external result of it, but I'm trying to isolate what's actually happening. How are we? Is it a stress response that we're dealing with? Is it a lack of love response that we're dealing with? Is it like which one of the 6 basic human needs or whatever are we responding to? And let's talk about it on that core of a level, because I think if we heal, this is my perspective, and you've had more of an experience with mental illness than I have, so that's why I'm sharing this perspective with you. I'm here. I want to hear your thoughts. But if we talk about these different mental illnesses from a principle of the actual synapse connection wiring issues, not necessarily how they're being manifest in our behavior, then I think we could actually accomplish greater change in that process. I used to be a very angry, unforgiving, almost to the level of hateful person until I recognized kind of what you were saying, we're all one. Once I internalized that we are all one, it wasn't like I had to go and isolate every bad feeling I had and change how I felt. Immediately, I just felt love for everybody and every situation and gratitude. It wasn't like I had to go isolate each experience. Now, there's still sometimes habits that are manifest, like, oh, for some reason, I'm so used to acting towards this person not in love that once I see it, I'm like, oh, that's inconsistent with my beliefs now. And then it changes pretty rapidly as soon as I'm brought attention to it. But I changed a core belief, and that changed the behavior in a lot of different circumstances. So that's how I view mental illness. And so I want to get specific about the process, as well as being general enough that, hey, we can all recognize we all have these processes in our lives, and not necessarily look at the behavior as much as what's the neurological process that's happening, or the chemical or the electrical process, however you view the body, or the spiritual process. There's lots of different labels for it. So anyways, what are your thoughts about that? I'm curious.
No, I think you are right, and it is definitely a response to stress. I never break down unless I'm extremely traumatized or extremely stressed. Same with my mother. But I also think that anyone who hadn't slept for a few weeks straight, hadn't eaten, hadn't hydrated, may have a similar response, because it is like your body goes into fight or flight. All of the symptoms are of fight or flight. So whether it's, your adrenaline's pumping, you can't sleep. You see threat everywhere because you're taught that, when you're in fight or flight, you are on survival mode ancestrally. You don't eat, you don't sleep, you don't water yourself, because just trying to get through this really stressful, traumatizing, threatening experience is paramount. Everything else can wait. So there is, I do think that it's a natural reaction that maybe some people just go into in a response to extreme stress. Whereas, I kid around. I say, if I was an alcoholic, I would never have a manic episode, because instead of, I would be able to sleep every night, pass out, and then wake up and do it all over again, rather than go weeks on end without sleeping and then, not necessarily be all there. But I also want to, I had to, for my own well-being, you talked about your mind not working perfectly. I actually think that is an asset, that is the benefit, and that is a gift, because there is something to be said about the way that bipolar individuals think that is differently. We may not excel at the day-to-day tasks. Same with people with ADHD, of, paying their bills and going to work and doing administrative tasks. But people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Beethoven and Picasso and JFK and Winston Churchill, they were all bipolar, and they use their asset, their different way of thinking, to actually benefit mankind in another way. There is a fine line between genius and madness, and I think there are a lot of people with mental health illnesses. I call them mental health benefits, that maybe are on a high spectrum of the IQ scale. And this is a book that I do have. You're going to ask me about books at the end, but I just want to jump to this: A First Rate Madness. And Nasser Gaemi, he talks about how in times of crisis, leaders like Lincoln and Churchill were actually much more beneficial to a country, because their brain was able to act in crisis mode and make the correct decisions for the country, whereas a quote unquote normal, or what you would say a perfectly functioning brain, would have languished and wouldn't have made the correct decisions in times of intensity. So what I really do respect about that is that it, I may not be as successful in certain areas of thinking, But I have a lot more creativity. People with bipolar disorder are said to feel, invincible in times of hypomania. I wrote my master's thesis in 4 days, for instance. I've, traveled all over the world, mostly myself. I did my thesis work, research work in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, even though I'd never professionally worked in Russian before. All these things, it kind of does make you feel fearless. It makes you feel like you want to accomplish things that are great. There is grandiosity in there, but that grandiosity, if you don't believe you can be great, you'll never be great. So there's a lot of assets in the bipolar way of thinking, and that's, and my mother chooses to medicate, and she chooses to go into the medical industrial complex and take a pill every day. I choose to approach it in a different manner because I don't want to lose my ability to think creatively, my ability for my synapses to fire so quickly, my ability to write my thesis in 4 days. These things that, you can really tap into a genius that is a little bit different than, quote unquote, what you may call a perfect way of thinking. It's not a perfect way of thinking. It's very scattered, can be very confusing, but it can also be absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
You
No,
know,
I think when I say perfect, this is my definition of perfect, right? Because I think,
yeah,
again, in my
perfect.
life, it's
Optimal. Optimal.
well, even optimal is still. I mean, they both all fill the same role. So our language, and now you know more languages than I do. So unfortunately, we're having this conversation in English because that's the one I know, and I don't even know that one very well, if I'm being completely honest. But in English, right, there's a lot of subjectiveness to language. Okay, there's not a. I try to live my life as much as I can in objectiveness. Okay, well,
Yeah.
perfect is in my mind, it's a completely subjective word based on what your objective is.
Yeah.
So there's no like perfect way to do something. I had these are like crass examples, but it is my life. Okay, so I had somebody ask me, he's like, well, do you think it's bad to be addicted to pornography or to look at pornography? Like, is it bad and wrong? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, if your goal is to become addicted to pornography, I don't know any other way to do it other than to look at pornography, right? Like, so it depends on what your objective is. Now, for somebody who doesn't want to be consumed by that, if I were to be participating in an activity, it would not serve my purpose. It would not help me accomplish what I actually want to accomplish in my life. And so,
Yeah.
for some people, sounds like you, other individuals. I know what's his name. Flubber. What's the guy's name? Robbins. What's the guy's name?
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams. Yes. Okay. I'm like, what is this guy's name, right? He chose not to be medicated because it enabled him to do his job better than if he had medicated himself, right? Now, that doesn't, I mean, the ending kind of sucks, right? In one moment, he wasn't able to withstand the pressures of the downside swing of what he had chosen. But he chose that because his objective was to live a certain lifestyle and to be able to produce a certain thing for the world. And to do that, he couldn't medicate himself to do that. Now, my mom's chosen to medicate herself, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And
Fine.
there's nothing wrong with it. It all comes down to what your objective is.
Yeah. And her objective is stability, and her, and my objective is something a little bit different. And that's, that's really why I really believe in alternative medicine so fiercely, is because I have been able to completely cure my depression, which is the lethal part of my diagnosis, or what they say I have, the bipolar disorder. 20% of us will try to commit suicide. Half of us will succeed. And Robin Williams is arguably doesn't just have depression. I think he has bipolar. A lot of people in Hollywood have bipolar. The hypomania makes them very, very emotive, So, but so I worked for the last decade or 2 decades, really trying to hone in on the superfoods I need, the habits I need, these different aspects of healing and mental health and and therapy, different types of therapy that allowed me to heal my trauma in a way that I don't go into the deep dark depths anymore, and and that's and I think that's the grace, is because they say, with bipolar disorder, the depression is what what is harmful to you, it may kill you. And the mania is just harmful to everyone else. Like, you're having a great time, you're in ecstasy.
Yeah.
It's just like everyone else is suffering. So I'm still working on, my episodes are much shorter, and I bounce back really quickly. I don't go fully into the trance that I have before, but I don't necessarily want to get rid of. And that is the problem with bipolar individuals, or what they call people with bipolar, is they don't like to take their medicine because there is a euphoria associated with hypomania that is so tantalizing and so attractive that you don't want to let go of it. You don't want to come out of God's plane because it is very delicious. So, and in hypomania, you can create and you can do things that are unimaginable on a normal or brain. So, so I do like to step into hypomania, and I think that's how I got through college and grad school. Is I wouldn't start writing my papers until 1 a.m. and then having to tap into that adrenaline, that stress, that fight or flight, so that the words can pour forth. So so I have been hospitalized. I was hospitalized back in March because of the corona, lost all streams of income, was evicted, all sorts of things happened. So, there's a lot of trauma that I'm still trying to learn how to equilibrate in my life. But at the very least, I don't go into the deep depression. I've never not been able to get out of bed. I've never been suicidal, and thank the universe for that, because I think my heart goes out to all the readers out there that are in the deep, dark nights of the soul. And I just want to say that you don't have to stay there. I can help you. There's a lot that you can do that are really, really simple, that may take a little bit of effort, but that are essential, simple, that can take you out of those depths, because it's not just a chemical imbalance. A lot of it is you're not getting the right nutrients, you're not getting the right sleep, you're not getting the right nature time, the outdoor time, the right vitamin D, things that are very, very simple, but make a big impact on whether your brain is in that lethargic, dark state, or, flying in perfection.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Or objective.
So how did you, like, when you chose, hey, I'm not going to do medication, I'm going to go heal myself from these different areas.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, it's one thing to choose that for yourself. But the people who I know who have suffered from different mental illnesses, there's an enormous amount of pressure outward from not just their doctors, but from family members, other people who love them. And I'm putting that in scare quotes, not because, like, I don't think you actually love them, but everybody has, again, this is another word that's a subjective term, love. Just because I love somebody, I might do something that somebody else thinks is wrong or abusive, and not giving them their freedom. It's like, well, I'm doing it because I love them. Well, everybody has a different definition of how to express love. So that's why I'm putting that in air quotes. But how did you overcome your naysayers? Who are your biggest naysayers, or were they? And how did you move past them?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, the medical industrial complex, and I do want to say a caveat. To the FDA, I am not a doctor. I do not profess to treat or heal any disease. I'm simply putting forth information that has helped me as a natural healer, someone that has had a lot of information passed down through the generations of my lineage, and has worked a lot to heal myself and others. I'm just simply sharing what I know, but I do not profess to be a doctor in any sort of way. And I do say, whatever you decide, do it under the advice of your doctor and your family. Don't just listen to me. I do not hold myself responsible for your decisions. That's your life. But yeah, the naysayers, I mean, there is a lot of fear that is put forward on people that get any sort of diagnosis. Whether you have cancer, oh my God, if you don't get chemotherapy right now, you're going to die. If you, same with, all sorts of medication. Anytime you go into the traditional medical route, there is a lot of fear associated with that. If you don't follow my doctor's recommendations to a T, you will get this definite X result. And I started questioning the medical paradigm when I was 26 when I was discovered with cervical cancer. And I elected not to go through surgery that would have taken half my cervix. I canceled that surgery the day before after talking to my grandmother. whose mother was a healer, who she's a healer as well. And she said, do not get surgery, take this and this and this. Instead, you can't go back a piece of your body. And I opted to, go into the dark interwebs, use my body as a guinea pig for anything I found plausible, and everything disappeared in 5 months. And I saved my reproductive capacity. So, which is amazing. That would have been a big trauma to not be able to have kids when I was so young. And then after that, I did fall into the mental health route. And at one point I was prescribed 6 different pills. And I was working as a director of development for And Justice for All, which is the umbrella organization for the state's civil legal aid agencies. And I couldn't even function the whole morning. I was asleep. My hands would sleep. I couldn't type. I was started twitching. So they gave me medication to offset what, that I was twitching, or, and this and that. And I had to take Adderall because I couldn't concentrate. And it was just intense, really, really intense. And I just decided I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't be imaginative. I felt like a zombie. And I talked to my mom, and she said, once, I do feel like a zombie. I don't have the low lows, but I don't have the high highs. And I decided that moment that there has to be another way. Our bodies are created by, whether you believe in God or the universe, they are created to be perfect. And, if they're imperfect, it's not genetics. I don't believe necessarily. I think a lot of it's environmental. A lot of it's trauma based. A lot of it is, that you are nutritionally deficient in certain ways and your body's just responding in the only way it can. And that is, your body screaming for its needs to be met. Whether that's nutritionally deficient, whether that's sleep deprived, whether that's, onslaught of stress, inflammation, whatever it may be. But coming into homeostasis and balance is key. So the naysayers were definitely, the medical industrial complex, all the fear. It's like, if you don't take this, you will commit suicide. If you don't take this, you will be, and community members. To this day, I get shamed so often for, I'm very vocal on social media about certain things. And in the last 3 months since COVID broke out, I probably have had at least 15 people say, you're unstable, take your meds. You're a burden to society because you're opting to go the hippie route and you're not taking your medication. And I'm like, well, first of all, what burden? And second of all, my life is my life. And my choices are my choices. And I don't believe anyone, whether it's a doctor or a community member or a family member, has the right to dictate what you do with your one wild and precious body, your temple, So you got to listen to your intuition first and foremost. And I had to listen to my own screaming heart that said, this is not okay. This is not how I want to live. And take the really hard, necessary steps in order to change my diet, in order to put, specific emphasis on my sleep, on doing a lot of of really intense therapy, and not just traditional talk therapy, but a method called the work by Byron Katie. I also have done several vipassanas, intense meditations, in Thailand and in Portland, and I meditate every day. And I do a lot of woo-woo, hippie things. I've done foremost getting in the sunshine, being in nature. Did you know 2 hours of nature sounds will decrease stress by 800%? It's a very underutilized asset that the universe or God has given us. It's right there for free. And we don't, we often stay in our concrete little boxes and forget that there's this big, beautiful world out there that can make us feel better.
Yeah. So it's interesting when we use the words woo-hoo, woo-woo, or hippie, because they're labels. And
yeah,
it's almost like we're using the words that the people who don't believe it use. And we use them, and it almost comes across like a derogatory, it's okay if you think I'm crazy, but I'm going to do it anyways, rather than trying to make it more normal.
Yeah.
And it's rather than trying to make it more normal, we succumb to using words that other people may, like a recognition that other people may be offended. Most successful people that I've met, they all are not just active participants, but they're outspoken proponents of proper healthcare, proper meditation, all the things that the general populace are not participating in because they, in my opinion, have been brainwashed not to.
Yeah.
That, but all the successful people who have what, again, this is where the delusion comes in, right? This is where you go talk to a person who's successful, and they're going to look at the general populace and say they're delusional, right? They keep getting upset that they don't have what we have, but they're unwilling to do what we do. And so, like, whose fault is that? We told them, we've explained to them multiple times in multiple areas of how to achieve and become and gain everything that we have, and they still aren't doing it. Like, imagine how God feels. Same thing. He's sitting there, whoever this person is, looking down saying, okay, he's figured out mastery of all of the elements, and we're trying to learn these elements. And then we say, well, we don't believe because we don't understand. It's like, well, that doesn't make it any less real. But okay, I mean, like, you're delusional. That's fine. Like, you'll figure it out. Anyways, it's a funny concept. So what would you say is like one habit, mindset, or behavior that you use or used, and probably both, to consistently stay on top of your game and stay where you want to be mentally?
It's really hard because it's hard to isolate it down to one habit. I think it is, a variety of different things, but I think the most impactful has been the work by Byron Katie. And I don't know if you're familiar with that process. It is a self-inquiry process where you ask yourself, or someone asks you 4 simple questions, and it allows you to completely shift your perspective and let go of any painful thoughts, because you realize it's an untrue thought. Because reality can't hurt you. It's your interpretation of reality. And it's predicated on 3 businesses. There's your immediate present business. That's their business. Everyone else's business. And there's God's business, the past, the future, natural disaster, death, the corona. As long as you stay in your immediate present business, you cannot have a painful thought. It's when you stray outside that you have the painful thought, but it's an unreal thought, because you cannot absolutely know that it's true, whatever that person's thinking, or what happened in the past, because memories are subjective and the past doesn't exist. The future is just a figment of our imagination. So allowing yourself to go through these 4 questions and release any painful thought has been hands down the most foundational to help me deal with my depression, especially. I will never be a success. Is that true? First question. Can I absolutely know that it's true? Who am I? How do I react when I believe this thought? Which allows you to really feel all the negative emotion associated with the thought and let them go, because the best way out is through. It's when you bottle up your emotions and not release them that you really have the long-term issues with depression and anxiety and things like that. And then who would you be without the thought? Which allows you to replace all of the negative emotion with the positive emotion of who you'd be without the thought. So you realize, like, this thought isn't serving me. Why am I believing in it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love it. I have very similar questions that I came up with that helped me through my trauma as well. And I think that and I would write those down, go back and re-listen to it, and start asking yourself, journal about it. I think journaling is one of the most, thinking and feeling about stuff is good. Journaling is 1,000% better, because it forces you to actually isolate the feeling and describe it in language. And once you bring it back to yourself, you're like, I don't actually feel like that. It's just a way for you to, like, really check how you're feeling. And for me, it's what saved my life from a perspective of, I could have gone down a very different path, but I chose through journaling and recognizing, rereading what my thoughts were. I'm like, man, that's not who I believe I am. That's how I'm feeling. So I think journaling is a form of,
and I really believe in cognitive behavioral therapy for that same and NLP for that same reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are what we think, exactly. So it's really, really vital to really change and shift your normal thinking pattern, because your normal thinking pattern is giving you a next result that you don't necessarily want. So why not, change the way you think?
Yeah, exactly.
And around you will change, or.
Yeah. And that's what's so cool is that your reality is what you think your reality is. So if you want a new reality, if you don't like the reality you're living in, just reframe it. So how could, if
Exactly.
somebody wanted your help to do that, or somebody wanted to get
Hmm.
more in touch with your work? I mean, we haven't even talked about her whole coaching brand.
Yeah.
Maybe take 2 or 3 minutes to talk about that. But how would we get in touch with you? Where would we go? Websites, links, anything like that that could help us get in touch with you and have a more specific, intimate conversation with you specifically?
Yeah. So you can go to kissheal.com. That's my website. I I have ameliorated the symptoms. I have to say it that way. I can't say heal of a whole host of issues, whether it's been cancer in myself, chronic migraines, and people I know that I helped ameliorate and just giving them one supplement, depression, bipolar disorder, autoimmune disorders, all sorts of issues, intense anger issues, intense mental health problems and lethargy um, and it's I have a 3 month process, a 3 month program called the Kiss Fate, and we go through an 8 prong process of a mind, body, and spirit healing. Because I do believe that you need to work on all of those. You can't just focus on the body because the mind will manifest disease much quicker than anything else external. We are what we believe. Did you know that people in a study, those with stage 4 cancer were found, like 65% of them were found to have really deep seated forgiveness issues where they haven't forgiven something really intensely. Um, so I do I do the work with my clients. I go through and we change your diet. We go and we fine tune your supplement regimen, and we focus on, you know there's focus, there's fasting, and we do a lot of cleansing regimens. People don't underestimate the power of a heavy metal cleanse. We are so polluted. And so the metal cleanse I do with my clients, that one, my one friend, on the second day she was on it, she cut her antidepressants in half. We underestimate, there's a lot of different issues that can go into us, our complete perfect faculties being dampened. So whether it's letting go of heavy metals, whether it's letting go of trauma, letting go of painful, erroneous thoughts, letting go of bad eating habits, all these things can contribute to our poor mental health. So, there I do have an 8 prong method, and I do insist on, really, really targeting going through a 3 month intensive process, because that, it takes at least 17 days to change your habits. And it takes, even longer than that to release heavy metals properly, and really go through, the kinds of therapy that you need. So, there, I do have a 3 month process. I can also do piecemeal consultations, but I do prefer to work with people one on one, really intensely, really intimately, to be your coach, to be your confidant, to be your therapist, and to be um, your cheerleader. That yes, you can do it. Yes, these are the things that you can do. I have a very simple one pager that allows you to rate your mood per day based on the things that you check off that we do together as part of a process, and really visualize how certain things work. Like looking on the specific day, is your mood lower this day than this other day? Oh, well, you went outside for 15 minutes that day and you did some cognitive behavioral therapy, and you took all your medicines and your green shake. That's why you feel better. This other day, you didn't get enough sleep, you didn't go outside, and you didn't exercise. That's why your mood is lower. And I think looking at it I come from a scientific background, and looking at the statistical perspective of being able to measure how you feel based on what you're doing that day, and really seeing it in one place, can really help rewire good habits, because you realize that, look, not eating sugar today may have I may have momentarily put aside my pleasure, but look at my benefit for how much better I felt overall that day.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'm a huge proponent on actual real feedback and tracking. The more you track,
Mhm.
the more clarity you have on where you actually are, then you can actually make decisions. Before you track it specifically, then it's going to be really difficult to make any level of like really consistent decisions. So go check her out on those places. Links will be in the bio here. We're going to move on to the legacy on rapid fire section. This is, these last two sections are my favorite. So this section, again, 5 questions, and we're going to just ask them 1 word to 1 sentence answers. We want to move through this super fast. So this is legacy on rapid fire. Are you ready for this?
I am.
Perfect. What do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
My own erroneous thoughts about myself. Even though I've done the work on myself for so long, there's still, I'm still not immune to the thoughts that say, hey, you're not good enough. Hey, you're not doing this well enough. Hey, this habit, you're effed up because you can't get this habit right. So really I am my own, and also the Corona, I think there's a lot of people that aren't, spending money on anything that's not essential right now. So I lost all my clients with the Corona, and my business really tanked. So I think these are really interesting times, but this is also an opportunity to go inside and reconceive what is possible for us too. So there is a gift here if
Awesome.
we look at it.
Yeah, and what do you believe is the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
Changing my outlook, changing my mindset.
Okay. What do you feel is your greatest success at this point in your life?
I think I've done a lot to get to where I am. I've gotten through undergrad and grad school with 0 debt, top of my class, and I've really am tenacious. I never let life get me down. I always keep going, even under the threat of overwhelming circumstances. I was jailed in Thailand, and instead of wallowing in a corner, shaking myself into a stupor, I almost called a revolution. I sang and danced for 2 days straight, and had to have the military come in and got myself out of Thailand in 2 days. So I think there's a lot of grit to me, and so I think that's my greatest success.
Awesome. I love that. And what are a few books that you would recommend to the Fuel Your Legacy audience?
Byron Katie's Loving What Is, Philip Shepard's New Self, New World, and Nasser Gaimi, A First Rate Madness.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, so this is my next question. This is my last capstone question. It's one of my favorites to ask. Hopefully you're prepared. I told you it was going to be a surprise unless you listen. So here's the question. We want to know what legacy you're building. So we're going to pretend that you've died and that you have children, and that you get to come back in time and listen 6 generations from now. And if they were sitting around a table discussing your life, discussing what Kseniya's done and what she accomplished over her life, what do you want them to be saying about you and your legacy 6 generations from now?
Well, hopefully I help spark a love revolution, a quantum leap in consciousness. But I think a lot of us are working on that same thing. I really hope to rewrite our concepts of mental illness. I am writing a series of books that re-envision what it means to be psychotic, what it means to be enlightened, what it means to have consciousness, what it means, what our religions mean, world mythology means, and tying that into a fictionalized but also part memoir narrative that is the past, present, and future all encapsulated. So I'm hoping that with those books, perhaps I inspire us to really work on ourselves, to really come into our own perfection, into our own fruition, into our own capabilities of manifesting whatever life we envision. And I hope that life is part of it is changing our systems and our current reality, because it is madness out there. When I go into the psychiatric wards, I see a lot more sanity there than I do out here, because is that I don't understand why we have systems that are so harmful to so many of us. So I hope that we reimagine what it means to live in a society, what it means to be kind to each other, what it means to achieve our dreams, but in looking at the whole, rather than just the individual? What does it mean to look at ourselves as we are all one, as you said? And what can we do to create a world where every single one of us is happy, is able to achieve their dreams, is healthy, is vibrant?
I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. I'm excited for you to be successful. I'm excited to work more with you on different areas moving forward. And thank you so much for being a guest today on the podcast. And if you guys are at all interested in learning more about her, I mean, there's so much stuff that we did not cover. You really should just go follow her on Facebook, Instagram, and allow yourself to see more of the way she sees the world. I think there's a lot of happiness, joy, peace, and love in viewing the world that way. And what helped me and what I've seen help others is getting around people who view the world in a way that you want to view it. And then you will begin to, through osmosis, see the world that they see it. And I'm just grateful for you. Thank you so much, Kseniya. And we'll catch you guys next time on Fuel Your Legacy. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.